Welcome back, EDH fanatics. We have another 4-player game for you this week, so get ready. I'm playing Roon of the Hidden Realms. Brian is playing Rafiq of the Many. David, who's a newcomer, is playing Maelstrom Wanderer. And Josh, also new, is playing Omnath, Locus of Rage. Since me not reading out the hand seemed to work really well and people liked it, this is what we're going to do from now on. This is my hand. This is Brian's hand. This is David's hand. This is Josh's hand. David wins the die roll and starts off, which is probably not a good thing considering he's playing Maelstrom Wanderer. For his very first land, David drops a Breeding Pool tapped. He passes to Josh. Josh plays a mountain and passes to Brian. Brian explodes at the gate, playing an island, casting Soul Ring, and then casting O Naginata, I think is how it's pronounced? I don't know. My turn sees a little bit less action. I play a forest and pass to David. Inspired by my play of a forest, David also drops his own and then casts Coiling Oracle. He reveals Steel Hellkite, which goes to his hand. Josh also wants to get in this forest action and plays one of his own before passing to Brian. During his first main phase, Brian plays Seaside Citadel. Feeling like there aren't enough swords on the field, he casts Sword of Feast and Famine and passes. I have a fairly uneventful turn. I play a Plains and pass to David. David's turn sees a lot more action. Paying 2 life, he then casts Birthing Pod, a very good card. Envious of all of Brian's toys, David swings Coiling Oracle at him for 1. Channeling his inner control player, Josh draws a card, plays Rootbound Crag, and passes. Brian plays a forest for his turn, then taps out to cast Rafiq of the Many and Masterwork of Ingenuity. He has the Masterwork come in as a copy of the O Naginata. I play Academy Ruins for my turn and pass. David plays an island for the turn, then taps his mountain and pays 2 life to kill Coiling Oracle to go find a 3-drop with Birthing Pod. That 3-drop just so happens to be Wood Elves, which he uses to find Stomping Ground, taking 2 damage to have it come into play untapped. Josh, which I'm sure is a big surprise to you guys by this point, plays a forest and passes. Brian plays a Sunpetal Grove and then does what every Rafiq player ever does. He loads up his commander with a bunch of equipments and tries to blow someone out really early. Not wanting this game to be about 5 seconds long, I decide to use Swords to Plowshare, killing the commander but gaining Brian 12 life. Having spent all his mana to equip Rafiq, Brian passes to me. I drop a Hollowed Fountain for my turn untapped, and pass. David plays Carpulsan Forest, and then casts Solemn Simulacrum. Moving to combat, David swings Wood Elves at Brian, bringing him to a modest 50 life. In his second main phase, he uses Birthing Pod to get rid of the tapped Wood Elves, finding Oracle of Moldiah. Shuffling his deck to see if he hits anything relevant, he reveals a Cross-In Grip. He plays a second land for turn in the form of Strip Mine before passing to Josh. Josh plays Ancient Tomb and passes. For his turn, paying 4 mana, Brian casts Phyrexian Metamorph, copying Soul Ring. He then taps out to cast Stonehewer Giant. For my turn, I play a Canopy Vista and then cast Reflector Mage, returning David's Oracle of Moldiah to his hand. Having hit 8 lands the turn before, I'm pretty sure it's obvious what David's about to do, but just in case, he casts Maelstrom Wanderer. His first cascade reveals Bloodbraid Elf, who in turn cascades by itself. Elf reveals Crystal Shard, which David casts and it enters the battlefield, a very good card for Maelstrom Wanderer. His second cascade hits him Palinchron, which is just not great at all. In response to Palinchron's Enter the Battlefield effect, I blink with Momentary Blink, Reflector Mage, returning Maelstrom Wanderer to David's hand. My thought process was he was going to bounce it anyway with Crystal Shard, at least this way he doesn't get a free attack in. Moving to combat, he swings the Elf at me and Solemn at Josh. During his second main phase, David uses Birthing Pod on Solemn Simulacrum, drawing a card, then going to find a 5-drop. He finds Seedborn Muse, then uses Crystal Shard to bounce Stonehewer Giant back to Brian's hand. Playing a land, Josh finally has enough mana to cast Omnath, Locus of Rage. Thank goodness. David puts the brakes on that almost immediately with a Plasm Capture. Josh lets Omnath go to the graveyard, which at the time really confused me, but since you viewers know what he's had in his hand, it makes a little bit more sense. Brian spends his turn casting Rafiq of the Many, and then casts Blighted Agent. For my turn, I cast Birthing Pod, and pass. This is especially stupid of me considering we saw that David had a Cross-In Grip on top of his library. Naturally, at the end of my turn, David uses it. He also uses Crystal Shard to bounce Rafiq back to Brian's hand. With a ton of mana, David uses his first main phase to cast Maelstrom Wanderer. In response, I Cyclonic Rift Sceneboard Muse. David hits Mana Vault and Worldly Tutor for his 2 Cascades. He finds Teferi and puts it on top of his library. Using some of his leftover floating mana, David bounces Palinchron with Crystal Shard to his hand. He recasts Sceneboard Muse and then plays his land for the turn in the form of a mountain. Moving to combat, David swings Elf at Josh and Palinchron and Maelstrom Wanderer at Brian. During his second main phase, he pods away Elf, finding the Teferi that he put on top. That wasn't hard. Finally seeing his time to shine, Josh casts a face-down creature, takes 2 damage and casts Crucible of Worlds, and then passes to Brian. Brian casts Rafiq for what feels like the 100th time this game, and then proceeds to deck out his Blighted Agent. David tries to use Crystal Shard to bounce it back to Brian's hand, but he has the 1 mana open. In an incredibly unexpected turn of events, David goes from probably the most commanding position I've seen for a long time and gets blown up by a 1/1 unblockable Infect creature. Not wanting Brian to blow people out with more Infect damage, I use Gilded Drake to take his Blighted Agent. With nothing else to do, I pass to Josh. Josh activates his Morph creature at the end of my turn, revealing Den Protector, who brings back Omnath to Josh's hand. During Josh's first main phase, we see the triumphant return of Omnath, Locus of Rage. He plays Blighted Woodland, getting himself a 5/5 red and green token. Now having a decent set of blockers, Josh passes to Brian. Brian wastes no time re-equipping his gear to my Gilded Drake, which I guess is his Gilded Drake, but I own it, but he controls it? Yeah, okay. Moving to combat, he smashes in my little 3/3 for 22 damage to me. Sword of Feast and Famine triggers, causing me to discard a card, and Brian gets to untap. Using all that untapped mana he just gained, Brian recasts Stonehewer Giant. He passes to me. I pray to whatever gods are listening for the hope of a top deck of a century. I don't get it. With no sweet top deck, I move to plan B. I stick my sword on the Blighted Agent and I swing at Brian. At this point, my only way to kill Brian is basically through Infect damage because he's got such a life pad. He takes a little bit of damage from the sword trigger and I gain a little bit. I then pass to Josh. Starting off his main phase right, Josh plays a mountain and gets another 5/5 token. He then taps out to cast Boundless Realms, kind of living the dream for any Omnath deck. Omnath triggers and gives him 11 5/5s. He then casts Eternal Witness, returning Boundless Realms back to his hand. His board state quite secure, Josh passes to Brian. Brian activates Stonehewer Giant in his first main phase, finding Argentium Armor. He casts Whisper Silk Cloak. First, Brian goes to equip the Masterwork of Ingenuity, which is the O Naginata. He then proceeds to try and equip Whisper Silk Cloak, but I have a response to that. Flashing Momentary Blink, I bounce my Reflector Mage, causing Gilded Drake to go back to my hand. With not enough mana to cast anything, Brian passes to me. For my main phase, I cast Venser the Sojourner, bouncing my Reflector Mage. I move to combat, swinging the Blighted Agent at Brian, dealing another 3 Infect damage to him. At the end of turn, Reflector Mage comes back and I bounce Rafiq to Brian's hand. On his main phase, Josh recasts Boundless Realms, but he only has 10 basics left in his deck. For his combat step, Josh swings 4 tokens at me and swings 25 points of damage at Brian. I die and Brian takes a ton of damage. With 5/5 blockers that deal damage when they die, Josh confidently passes turn. Putting all his eggs in one basket, Brian puts the 2 O Naginatas and the Sword of Feast and Famine onto his Stonehewer Giant. The Sword of Feast and Famine will let him swing in, but Brian's not too sure what else he'll find in his library. Activating Stonehewer Giant, Brian's able to find Grafted Exoskeleton, getting him there with Infect damage again. Well, that was a much shorter game than the last one, and I'm very thankful for it. Looking back, David played incredibly well. Maelstrom Wanderer is a monster, and David seemed to be able to hit and get all the right drops at the right time. Unfortunately, he was unable to predict Infect damage, so that was kind of a bit of a lackluster kill. Why Josh kept a land with that many lands and no action, I'm not entirely sure. I'm really glad that he got back in the game near the end, because at least he was able to do stuff, and Boundless Realms with Omnath, Locus of Rage is really, really cool. This game was the actual game to cause me to reflect on my Roon deck. It made me realize I'm not really enjoying it very much anymore, and frankly, if I want to make something that has bouncing creatures in it, I'll probably make Brago, because he just does it better. Brian played Rafiq really well. Not much to say. I mean, he played equipments, he put equipments on creatures, he turned creatures sideways. It's pretty much how Rafiq plays. It's very linear, kind of boring, but he did it, and he was able to get there for a win. As always guys, thanks for watching, and be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more.